Welcome to the Extra Take. I'm your host, Chris, and with me today is my friend, Wool, who's going to be the co-host of the Extra Take. Wool, how's it going? It's been a
Yes,
while since we've done one of these things.
it has. It has been a while. I think what was
Yeah.
it the end of season 2 for the Wheel of Time. Can't quite remember
Yes.
the dates, but it was towards the January, February. Was it? That was this year. Or was it end of last year?
No, I feel like it was at the end. No, definitely wasn't the beginning of the
End of
year. I feel
last
like it
year.
must have been at the end of last year, but I could be
Oh,
wrong on
goodness
that.
me.
But
No, you're probably not. The days and
yeah.
weeks and months fly by.
Yeah. So for people who don't know what we're talking about, since this is the very first episode on a brand new channel, I have a separate channel, which is also linked on this channel called the Nullify Take channel. It's a podcast YouTube channel that is sort of dedicated to talking about competitive reality TV. And I've built that sort of over the last 2 years with a bunch of friends, and it's been a passion project of mine. And it got to a point where I was like, I had Wool on the podcast. We did Wheel of Time, which is non-reality TV related, a little bit of a test to see if people would even be interested, I guess, if it came to things that weren't reality TV related. And I feel like we had like a really good community when we did it. And, you had enough fun to want to come back and do something different,
Yes.
which is good.
Yeah. No, I had a great time with it, to be honest. It was spending a lot of my youth as a bit of a thespian and acting and everything else. It was a nice way of scratching that itch outside of work.
It's great to have, like, I feel like a passion project, something that gets you passionate about, just your week. You're like looking forward to it. For me, with the Nullified Take, I've been a fan of competitive reality TV forever, basically. I feel like Survivor, I was 10 when I started watching it. It's now been on TV for over 20 years, 24 years.
It's crazy
And
to think, isn't it?
it's crazy when you think about how many decades that's gone. And it probably will go to 30 plus years with the way the show's going. So, but it got me into that type of sort of world of competitive reality TV. I'm a pretty competitive guy as well. And I think, doing the Extra Take channel is going to be a lot of fun for people who know me from the Nullified Take, maybe a broader audience that will stumble across us and will, hear a little bit about, myself, South African / Kiwi, yourself being a Kiwi, being from New Zealand. I don't know how many New Zealand Australian podcasts are out there at the moment like this, to be honest.
I genuinely don't know. I don't listen to many podcasts myself, but the ones that I do tend to be American, I think. It'll be, you never know, breaking new ground.
Breaking new ground. Like, I think it's gonna be fun. It's gonna be something different. And another thing that I'm really enjoying about doing this, the title of this podcast is gonna be, how to start a podcast. And we're gonna talk a lot about sort of what got me into podcasting. I'll give, I guess, tips and advice. Not that the podcast that I have is like massive. We've got close to 2,500 subscribers now, which, takes a long time to get there and get that loyal following. But we'll talk a little bit about, I guess, what the thinking was going into creating that podcast, and also what I think sort of sets the podcast apart from other podcasts, because you need to have that unique selling point. But I'll try and give some tips and tricks, and then overall, we'll talk about what this podcast is going to look like and the format of it moving forward. I'm really excited because I get to talk about, competitive reality TV is like this small part of what I love, but I'd say probably 98% of my life is well and truly without, it's out of that sphere of competitive reality TV. So I'm really looking forward to sort of sharing a little bit of that. And I know, Wool, you're someone that, have got a lot of, different rich life experiences. You've lived in Dubai. You're now in New Zealand. You're a headmaster, for people who don't know. Just stopped doing a headmaster.
Just finished it.
Career change, so yes. I feel like it could be interesting from that perspective as well. Like, I think there's a really vast amount of topics we can dive into on this channel.
Yeah, a lot of life experience between the pair of us. And the nice thing is, the podcast won't be hemmed in by a certain topic, like your other podcast, with it being reality TV. We can sort of branch off, and if there's a certain topic that our viewers want us to talk about or are interested about our thoughts on, we can definitely add our little spice to that as well, which would be 100%. Interesting.
Yeah, I agree. And that's really where, one of the things, funny enough, with creating a podcast and creating the one that we've got on the main channel, the Nullified Take channel, that unique selling point is really the community for me. Like, the only reason I still keep doing that podcast is because of the community that we have. Like I come in, I've got Kiwi immediately here leaving a comment, like and subscribe. She's from the main channel. I've seen Dolores already saying, keep going at it. She's from the main channel. So, you get people like that who sort of come over and, will follow whatever you're doing. And it's really because of the community, because I love talking to the live audience. So at the moment, we don't have many that are popping into the live audience. But I think as the channel grows, as we have people listening to this at a later stage, just know if you go check out the Nullified Take channel, even if you're not a reality TV fan, you'll get a feeling for how I like to run a podcast, which is different to a lot of other shows. I love bringing out like all of the comments, acknowledging it, getting people's thoughts and takes in it. And very much our live audience will become a part of the podcast. They're going to be like the third or the fourth member, depending on how many people we've got in a podcast moving forward. They'll be that extra member consistently when we chat all.
Yeah, which is really key to include them, and it'll be great. It'll be interesting to see the community that we can hopefully gather here, if it's a sort of a branch off or if it's a new group, or it'd be interesting.
Yeah, 100%. Well, you're kind of new to the podcasting realm. I know you've played around being a somebody that's really passionate about gaming, and obviously that's how we met. And maybe that's a story for a different podcast.
Yes.
But being someone that has dabbled into streaming and doing different things, like, is there any questions that you would have as like a new person? If you were sitting on the other side here, you're listening to this, you're clicking on the title, how to start a podcast. What are the things that sort of you would like to know about, I guess, creating a podcast? Because, obviously I sit on the other side of having done so already. So maybe I can give you some insights if you wanted to ask me some questions about it.
Well, I suppose my first question, and one of the big ones that you'll see a lot of streamers will go, just do it. Just press record and give it a go. What was your reason for pushing record and giving it a go? What was your first sort of clutch of going, I want to start this?
It's really interesting. For me, it's going to be very unique to, I think, a lot of other people. Everybody will have their own motivation for why they started a podcast. And what a lot of people don't know about me, the ones that have listened to the Nullified Take channel, is that when I started doing a podcast, I was actually at the lowest point of my life. And I'm not even over dramatizing it. Is that the right word for it? It's actually, it's like, I'm not trying to like overhype it. Like, at that point in my life,
dramatize.
Yeah.
Maybe?
Well, I'm not trying to overhype it. I was actually at a pretty low point, in the sense that my background is I love sports. I've competed at a very high level in karate, and that's sort of installed from a very young age, a high sort of ethic when it comes to working out, staying fit, all of those kind of things. And I got to a point where I was very much not engaging online at all. Like, you wouldn't have seen me on social media or any of that kind of stuff, because I was always training, I was always hustling, doing my thing to try and do like OCR, obstacle course races and things like that. And then I got a really bad injury just as COVID started around 2019, where I pulled a muscle in my chest, and it basically caused something throughout my whole spinal system, like my nervous system, called benign vesiculation syndrome. So you get like spasms and things like that as soon as you lift or you do anything. So I couldn't train for
nerve based. It was a nerve based injury,
and it took ages to get to the point where now things have quieted down. I couldn't drink coffee, which I've got my Boss coffee here now. I can drink it now. Anything that would get my nervous system going. I know it's a very long way to tell you about how I started podcasting, but I couldn't do any of that stuff. So my problem was, at that point in life, is that I didn't have any, like, I've got such an active mind and I have to stay busy, that
you needed that purpose.
I needed that purpose, and I didn't have that release because I couldn't physically train, which was something I love doing so much, that, I started watching more online shows and things like that, podcasts. For the first time in my life, I watched Twitch. I never watched Twitch. I never thought I'd be someone that would watch that. And the channel was inspired by a lot of what I saw on Twitch, which is why the community thing came on, because I took from Twitch. I was like, I like how they talk to their audience. I like how they make them feel a part of the show. So that's something I brought in. And then I've always been a consumer of podcasts. I've always listened to different podcasts, like the School of Greatness from Lewis Holmes. I always listen to Joe Rogan, which I know that's been controversial over the years, but I still love that podcast because they have so many different opinions on there. And I always listened to Rob as a podcast when it came to like reality TV. So I had different sort of things that I could pull from, and I thought, why don't I just try and get involved myself and start a podcast, right? Because now I don't have anything, like I don't have that hour every night that I'm training. I might as well do that. So two things happened. I ended up doing a podcast and I ended up building a gaming computer, and I got back into gaming, which I didn't do for about 6 years prior to meeting you all, because me and
Yeah.
you, we would have never, like, that's the
No.
strange things about life, is that if that didn't happen to me, you and I would never have met if I didn't have that injury, if I couldn't train and things like that, because I wouldn't have been online, to be honest.
Yep. And by all accounts, you wouldn't have done a podcast either, potentially. So
No. Yeah. Like, I wouldn't want to go back in time and go through that, because those 3 years were very frustrating to me. And I think that's probably something at some stage when we talk about comebacks and things like that. I've got a Spartan race that I'm doing next weekend. I am so excited about that. After 4.5 years, I'm back. I can go and do that stuff. And when it comes to like the mental side of it and trying to like stay in it when it felt like I was never going to be able to do it again, I think that could be a fascinating podcast in itself, that we could talk about.
And you've probably grown in mental fortitude and determination as well after battling through it all.
100%. Like, I mean, when you feel like a prisoner, like, again, like, and I don't say this lightly, because there are people that permanently are stuck in that place where they can't get their health back, or they can't come back from something like this. I'm one of the fortunate ones that I've been able to come back, and I am able to do some physical exercises and things like that again. But, I felt like a prisoner in my own body to a degree. And I think it really created a different level of empathy within me that I wouldn't have had prior to that. Like, now when I go to the supermarket and I'm seeing somebody like walking and they've got like a little bit of a limp, I look at them and I'm like, there's a story there. Something happened. I don't get it yet. But, I never used to notice things like that prior to that.
Yeah. I can imagine it would have been, was it tough hitting play or record to begin with as well? With that whole putting yourself out there? Because that's one of the ones I know, like for myself, and probably some of the people watching that have been interested in starting a podcast. The biggest hurdle for me is not necessarily the pushing record. It's the putting yourself out there into that sphere of people watching you and judging and talking and listening and watching, or not watching at all. And you're putting yourself out there. Like, there's a lot of those really sorts of barriers. And like say for myself, I've with my job as was a school principal, I'm still based in education. I've got to be very concerned about what I put out there publicly, as because of my status in the community or what I do. So I've got to be very mindful of all of that as well. So that was always a bit of a barrier, being a teacher and then a principal, as to what actually I put to film and to record, because it can always be found. What's on the internet can always be found, no matter where, no matter what you put. So that was always a sort of a barrier for myself, and that was never a concern for you going into podcasting.
I think that when you start having opinions about anything and you podcast about anything and you talk about it, one thing that you realize very quickly is that some people will be with you and some people won't. Like, and that's just life, right? As long as I feel good about what I'm putting out there, and at the end of the recording of this, I look back at it and I feel like I didn't say anything too stupid, I wasn't too out there, I'm okay with it. Like, if people come back afterwards, and I have had it, I feel like it's also when you start getting the one or two people here and there that leave comments that maybe aren't as great, and they have an issue with what you've said and things like that, it's a sign of success. And I almost now look at it as, I get excited when I do get one or two negative comments. Like, I've turned it into a positive, because it means that like, people are noticing the podcast. You know what I mean?
They're engaged in what you're saying and doing, I suppose,
and they're passionate about it. And I think one of the things I've done from the start on my podcast, because believe it or not, reality TV fans are some of the most opinionated people you can come across.
I'd believe it. I mean, reality TV is very divisive anyway, and the showrunners and producers do that purposefully to make that, that discussion. They want that sort of positive, negative, good and evil discussion, so they make sure they film it that way. So I could only imagine a regular conversation where you are talking about the pros and cons and how they've filmed and framed things to lead to those sorts of discussions, and then those comments.
So I kind of feel like, because I've lived and breathed reality TV, competitive reality TV with my podcast, that's prepared me for anything being thrown at me. Because the one thing I did always do, though, from the early days on that podcast, is that whenever I used to go into it, and I still do it now, is I'm also open to the idea that there are other people with different opinions. And I think my audience appreciates it, because I'll say, like, listen, this is how I feel. This person's not my cup of tea, but I realize that they may have some fans in the live here. And if you see it differently, if you love them, that's okay. That's what makes the Survivor community, the challenge community, whatever I'm talking about, that's what makes it such a great community, because we all are passionate about different people, and we all think we know the best way to play these games to get to the end and win. Like, we all have those opinions. And I try and make people, even if they don't agree with me, I'm okay with that. I'll pull their comments up. I'll give them some airtime. I won't change based on the fact that someone is necessarily disagreeing with me, unless they've got a very valid argument, then I'm open to it. But, for me, I've always wanted to create communities like, and specifically on that podcast, where everybody feels like I can voice my opinion. Even if I don't agree with the hosts, that's fine. I think that's a healthy way to look at it.
And you have such a wide variety of hosts and co-hosts now too, which will all have differing opinions from you also, which is a refreshing and I'm sure quite beneficial for your audience in general, because you'll have audience members that will favor one host to another, or appreciate a certain person's viewpoints over another because they sort of resonate with what they're saying more than maybe yourself. That's probably a really good question too. As you've grown, you have brought in new co-hosts, and you often have those hosts lead the channel for you for shows that you aren't necessarily following. How was letting the baby go a little bit like that? How was, taking your hands off the reins and letting someone else lead the cart for a bit? How was that?
That's a good question. And as you're talking about it, I am bringing up the channel just for people to see what we're talking about. The Nullified Take channel being the main channel. Now you can see the other channel on there, the Xtra Take as well, which is what we're on now. And like you can see a lot of Survivor content, challenge content, and so forth. And, it's a great question, because I did do that for a period towards the end of last year, but it actually killed my growth. Is something that I noticed. And not because I think the other people that came on board at the time, I don't know if it was that, they all had good quality, but I feel like my audience has gotten used to me, and I'm happy for my audience. If they're even in here, comment below and let me know, because this is a great opportunity for me to get feedback for free. I think a lot of them kind of expect me to be the main host now on the channel, where if Chris is not the main host, we love Maki, we love Kahuna, we love all these other, because they all have great opinions, like you said, and they're all different to me. But I think when you have that format, which our podcast is going to be a bit different, like there's going to be times where you're going to be leading, like you're asking me a lot of questions now. Sometimes it'll go the other way. But on that channel, I think they got used to me kind of directing the flow of the conversation a little bit, where when I started pulling away from it, it didn't necessarily get the same viewership. And YouTube is a very funny thing to try and figure out the algorithm. But what I found was, at that time, because some of these other shows, we were doing more content than ever, we were focusing on quantity at that point, it didn't necessarily help me with getting discovered on the main shows that have been doing well in the past. So we actually saw a dip in the sort of, I think, the algorithm for even presenting our content out there, because YouTube's a business. YouTube wants to make money, right? So
they're going to push you if you're getting viewers.
Yeah. And that's the stuff that's hard. But from the aspect of letting go of the baby and letting other people go, like, that's kind of, my background is I'm a sales manager.
Marketing.
I've managed massive teams before. Like, currently I manage 100 people. I manage 7 direct sales managers, and also now the training and development teams started reporting through to me. So I've also got the training team through to me. So I have to delegate.
You don't lie when you say you're a busy man, eh? You're like, you were just chilling.
No, I'm busy, mate. I'm super busy in my day-to-day. But a big part of my job is to delegate. That is literally what I do on a day-to-day basis. So I feel like doing the podcast, and again, I actually still feel down the line, I want to have more co-hosts or other hosts run different aspects of the channel, because it's the best way to grow our audience is to cover more shows. But in the short term, I feel like until we get that sort of growth to a point where I'm like, okay, we've now got enough where if we got a dip on some shows, it's not affecting my main shows as much. I think that would be the time to do it. I just think I pulled the trigger maybe a little bit too prematurely on that. And then obviously the problem is I can't main host everything because I don't have the time. That's always been a struggle.
Between that, you're doing your racing, you've moved to a different country,
Yeah. There's been a lot going on. There's been a lot going on, is all I'm going to say when it comes to it. But, like I said, I mean, and a lot of people probably say, well, if you've got time to do this channel, and if you're going to be putting content out here all the time, why don't you take another competitive reality TV show on and double down? And what I will say is this is going to be very
Prep
different
time.
with reality TV. It's the prep time. You got to watch the show. You got to write things down. Sometimes you watch shows twice. You've got to go into, like, when my job already is very strategic and analytical on a day-to-day basis, I have to also strategically think now about a show where people are making all these connections and they're making game moves and things like that. So it gets to the point where you can only take that much on, where this is almost a bit more free-flowing. We'll be having more free-flowing conversations in general, where the reason we started this was because one weekend you and I caught up and we were having this big chat. And we were like, shit, we should be recording right now. People may want to listen to some of the chats we have, you know?
We're interesting people. Well, we'll see.
Well, they'll be the judge
if
of
others agree or not.
they'll definitely be the judge of it. But I think one of the questions you haven't asked, and in my opinion is a very important one, and I started touching on it a little bit, is when you start a podcast, the hardest thing to learn, like you said, the first thing is record. Literally what we've done here. Episode 1, we're recording. We're putting some content out there. Yeah. And this is going to be probably the worst one we do, and it's going to become more and more structured. The more we do.
Someone who's got a nice flash setup, and then we've got me sitting here in an office. I'm holding a blooming 3D printed document. Takashi just sitting there quietly. I had just turned the heater off because it's freezing in here because it's middle of winter. It's winter time, but we're good.
Wintertime in the South Island of New Zealand is no joke. It is.
Yeah, and I'm being a little bit stubborn with the firewood too. We're not starting the fire until May, and so we're just waiting.
That's something, honestly, that I miss so much of the South Island, is the old houses with all of the fire making sort of capacities inside of the house, and then how you can put that together. Like over here, it's a heat pump, it's air conditioning. It loses that touch of just the good fire running, I absolutely love that. So that's something I definitely miss from my time having lived on the South Island. A lot of the houses are older over there, which is not great for insulation, but it's great for just a good fire making place.
Yes, yeah, we got a good log fire. But I'm trying, like I said, I'm trying to be a bit stubborn and go, no, it's not fully winter yet, but it's feeling it.
Yeah, so I do want to jump into the aspect of how do you get discovered when you put that out there, and I think we're going to learn with this podcast what is going to be like. I feel like it's going to be a lot harder, I think, with this podcast to get discovered, especially in the initial.
People won't be searching for specifics like you search for a specific, like your reality shows, Survivor podcast or Survivor thing. The analytics will bring you up because you're searchable. For us, maybe a little bit tougher to begin with.
But I actually think that the ceiling on reality TV is you're going to reach that a lot quicker than on a podcast like this. If you can break out, if you can get past, say, the first 1,000 subscribers, you start getting a really dedicated community of people who want to come here, want to have some really deep conversations, and want to be a part of, like, putting out ideas for, hey, we'd love for you to look into this, talk about that next. If we get that engagement right, I think the sky's the limit in regards to where this podcast could go if we grew it long term versus reality TV. That's such a niche. It's such a niche in that there's only a few podcasts really that live in that realm and that does extremely well. And it's really hard when you don't have that name recognition. Like, for instance, the fact that even we've gotten to the point of being past 2,000 subscribers on that channel, when I've never played any of these shows. Most of them are previous players that go and talk about the show. They get pretty big. 1 or 2 fan accounts do blow up as well, but not to the level of the same. Like Rob has a podcast, which is the biggest one. It's got about, I think, 120, 140,000 subscribers, and that's the biggest one in that space. And he's a previous player. He's a 2-time Survivor player, so that's why people want to hear his take. And he's done a great thing with that channel. But I wanted to get into, like, how do you do it, like, and how I did it, I guess, for that channel. So one of the big things for me when I jumped into doing the Nullified Take channel was, the name of the podcast was important, firstly, and I wanted to have a play on one of the advantages that was in Survivor. So there's this advantage called the nullifier that basically it nullifies an immunity play. So when you play immunity, so you can't be voted out, you play that and it nullifies it, basically. So it's almost like a reverse Uno card, I don't know, like on it. And you can still vote the person out. A lot of people hate that advantage. I actually thought it was a great advantage to counter idols in the game. And since then, the show's gone even more advantage heavy. But I wanted to have something that was, out there where people could recognize it as being
the play on words. And it's a deep cut too. So those people that actually do know the game well will understand that link.
Yeah, and it's still wide enough because I remember one of the first criticisms I had on the channel was like, well, why do you call yourself the nullified take? Like, no one's going to listen to you now. And I'm like, well, it's just because we don't take ourselves too seriously. Like, it's a take, but none of us have played the game. We're all fans. Maybe if one of us go out there and play the game, we can become the quantified take. I don't know. But, for now, it doesn't really matter. It's a show. Yeah. And we're just out there having fun, talking about it and so forth. But what I did was I was lucky enough to become friends with key people that were also in my space. So, Drew is a big part of definitely, and Chantel, that helped me grow that channel. I was with a different podcast prior to starting my own one, just for maybe about, 4 or 5 months. I was with them. And I met Drew and Chantel via that network in the podcasting realm. That was before I jumped and did my own thing. And at that point, Chantel had about 10,000 subscribers and Drew had over, I think back then he would have had about 20,000. He's got over 30,000 now. So two really key players in the space who were very big and good at what they did. Yeah. So I was lucky enough that they were willing to come onto my channel and we did cover some of the shows together, which I think brought some of that fan base in. They got exposed to me, which definitely helped. There was one key thing is if you can get people on that are big in the space, get them on. I also did a lot of exit interviews or press interviews with like previous players. I reached out to them on Instagram. So, getting a couple of interesting people on, they bring their own fan base. People check it out. They're like, oh, actually, I kind of like the interview. I'm going to stick around. And then I also marketed myself a lot on like Reddit, under Survivor fan pages. They've gotten a lot harder when it comes to doing that. Like they actually remove a lot of like podcast links and stuff like that now. Yeah, which is a shame because that was a really great way for people to sort of see your content and like I always said, like let it be a free market. Let people put things out there and let the audience decide, like if they want to do it. But anyways, the admins have really become strict in that. And then the other part, another key player for me was I became friends with the biggest Australian fan page, the admin and creator. Became friends with her and she actually started coming onto the podcast, Michelle, and she would do the Amazing Race with me. And her page has got like over 20,000 people that are in there. So she allows me, even still up until this day, to post whenever I do Survivor content for Australia Survivor in there. So new people discover us all the time via that. So I guess the biggest thing is that even though we've got into 2,500 or close to that now in subscribers, for you to do good in podcast, you have to market yourself consistently and put your content out there, because you could be putting together the best content, but if people don't know you exist, they're not going to come and click on it and look at it. YouTube's not going to recommend you if you're not monetized and if you're not making them money. It's a very cruel YouTube economy out there,
And by the sounds of it, it's also finding the right people to link up with really helped your growth early on too, by the sounds of it. Having some key 100%. Players that you described, bringing their audience in and going, hey, we like what Chris is doing. We might hang around or come back, which is fantastic. And it was really nice of them to link up with you. They obviously felt that they enjoyed what you did, because they would have watched and seen the videos that you did previously before sort of linking up and going, yeah, we'll join up with you as well, which is awesome.
Yeah, and I mean, I'd like to believe I'm a likable guy. I'd like to believe just by them having a chat with me, if they finally get on the podcast, they'll be like, oh, actually, I had a good chat with Chris. I don't mind coming back on. And, those are friends. Like, those are like real friends of mine now, because we've done so many podcasts together. You can't do hours and hours. Like, I mean this, hours and hours, because like one podcast could be 2 hours or an hour and a half or an hour. And on my main channel now, have done 400 and something, like maybe like 451 episodes, right? Or videos that I've uploaded. I would say easily with those two, I've probably done 100 of those.
Yeah.
So those are a lot of hours for you to spend with someone. You get to know people pretty well after that. And what a lot of people don't realize with the podcast is that after we stop recording, the conversations that we have afterwards are insane. Like, I would be podcasting with these guys and then we'll have another chat for an hour afterwards, and that's how you get to know people. And I was lucky enough to go meet Drew, who was one of the people who helped with that, sort of initial stages of getting the podcast recognized. And when I went over to Florida, I met him in person. We hung out. That was amazing. And he was just as cool of a dude in real life as he was on the podcast. And then Chantal, I was supposed to meet her last year as well, but then unfortunately due to family reasons, I had to go back to South Africa and I couldn't go to Canada. But like Chantal and I, we will meet. That's a given. Like at some point we're going to be at some sort of a Survivor event in the US or something like that. But I think finding people to do it with is key. And then the other part of it was in those early stages, they really were the lifelines for me. Like all those people that I've mentioned there, Michelle, Drew, Chantal, they were my hosts when I didn't have permanent hosts. And then Jake, who was a US podcaster that I did a bit of content with in the previous channel, he came over with me when I started my own channel and jumped on as well. So I really was, in the beginning, I was struggling even to find good co-hosts. Like with this podcast, we've already started. I've got a co-host. I've got someone I've got good banter with. I've got a good friend on here. It's hard just to get other people to believe in what you're trying to do. And that's the stuff that you struggle with when you start, I think, a podcast.
Yeah. And it's making sure you've got someone that you can have that banter with and that relationship, that on-screen chemistry of discussion that is actually going to be viewable. I'd imagine it'd be very hard to do a podcast on a Survivor by yourself, but I'm sure you've done many, but it would be quite hard to sort of keep that conversation going. You need to have the back and forth. If you don't have a like you see streamers that'll have it, but they've got a constant stream going on the chat, so they can actually have that to and fro there.
Back and forth.
Back and forth. But if you don't have that with someone on, it would be very hard. And that's a different skill. I know there are definitely streamers out there that can just talk to themselves and they'll be doing something specifically like gaming that they can do that and talk to themselves for hours, but that's a special skill in itself.
Doing it live is extremely difficult. Like, I had a couple of times where, for some other reason, like when I didn't have many co-hosts, one of them would be sick or couldn't make it, or we couldn't make the time work out, and then I would have to do a live podcast solo. And it's difficult when you're speaking to the camera live because you can't edit or clip it in any way, and you don't have that time for someone else to take over the conversation so you can gather your thoughts on what you want to ask or say next.
That pause or dead air would be like, oh, how do we feel that? That's really awkward.
But I think a big part of throwing yourself out there and doing content like this and being live is that you also have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. So if it happens, so what? You're going to get better. The more you do it, the more fluent you're going to get at, presenting yourself. But one of the bits on my channel that I did, which wasn't a podcast, was I actually did what was called the top 5 takes for quite a while as well, where I would record for 10 to 15 minutes with my top 5 takes of the episode, which the audience actually loved. And I think YouTube's more created for that type of content in any case, and the algorithm produces it a lot more. But the biggest problem that I had was I was doing it for a show like Australian Survivor that was 3 episodes a week. You'd have to watch it right after. You've got to record it. You've got to edit it. You've got to upload it, and it takes a lot of time. Like if I could do the channel more full-time, or if it was something that you didn't have to have like a full-time job, you could have a part-time job on the side. I feel like you could really do well in that space. And I take my hat off for people that are really good at it. Like Drew's a great example. Drew doesn't have a podcast. He's got a channel where he pre-records a lot of the video editing stuff that he does, which is a lot of work. It takes a lot of effort, but he's also at that size now where over 30,000 subscribers, a great Patreon community, which I'm a part of, and things like that. So, he's more able to do it and invest the time in it, but he did it prior to that in any case. And I probably started at the right time, maybe around, I never asked him, and we'll get him on the show one point to talk about how he put his channel together, because I feel like, I've got insights to what got me to 2,000 subscribers. This guy's now been at 30,000. So it'd be very interesting to see what he's got to say about that,
And how did, and I'm guessing your first goal, and I think when we started hanging out, I think you were about 400 or 500 subscribers.
Yeah, you remember that?
that
What was it
first
like when I
1,000,
told you guys?
yeah, and it was like, oh, this is interesting. But then I remember when the joy you got when you hit that 1,000
Oh, it was massive.
was just huge, because I know you'd put so much time and effort and
Yeah.
energy, and you'd grinded so hard to get to that 1,000.
Yeah.
What's the next sort of milestone now that you're at about 2.5 or two? Was it 2.3?
2,300 and something subs at the moment. We're getting closer and closer. 2,500 is always at the moment, I'm still breaking it down in my mind in like 500 increments.
Yeah,
Like when I get to 2,500, that's a massive achievement. Halfway to 5,000, like, which is the goal to continue to push on. But I've always said to myself, if we can continue to grow the channel, the main channel, by about 1,000 subscribers a year, I'm very happy. But you know what? There comes a point after 1,000 subscribers where you become less focused. Like, it's obviously you want subscribers, but the main reason I want subscribers at this point isn't for the vanity reason. It's because if I reach out to have like a producer from a show on my channel, or I would reach out to have like a US contestant from the challenge on my channel, the first thing they look at is how many subscribers does this person have.
Gives you leverage, it gives you weight, it gives you sort of purchasing power, so to speak, doesn't it? It gives you that,
100%. Yeah. And that's more relevant to that space than anything else, but it's probably the same in other genres, wherever you're going to do your podcast. But it really helps with just getting people of some significance on the channel that can continue to help you to grow. But what becomes more important after 1,000 subscribers, or what became more important to me, was the fact that if you get really good engagement, like now I found that, when I do a podcast and I get like 60 people watching live, or we've had in some podcasts 100 people watching live, that's exciting to me. It's exciting that enough people, want to jump on. Like, this is the first episode we've ever done, and we've got 7 people watching us right now, which I'm very aware of. We don't see any. Yeah.
Hello.
Hello, everyone out there. They're not
awesome.
They're not commenting at this stage, but I love the fact that we get live audiences. I love the fact that people are commenting. I love bringing those up. The engagement after 1,000 subscribers became more important to me than actually having subscribers, if that makes sense.
100%.
But you know why 1,000 subscribers is so important to YouTube, right? You know why that was that milestone.
Was that monetization?
Monetization, yeah. And as soon as you get monetized, there's a better likelihood that your content is actually going to get recommended in the algorithm. If you're not monetized, YouTube doesn't make money out of people clicking on it. And this is another thing people don't know, right? And maybe something I can share as well, because I'm sure there's going to be someone that's going to come across this that don't know anything about myself or the channel or any other channels. But, one of the frustrating things about YouTube's at time can be the ads, right? You click on a video, you want to watch it, there's like 3-4 ads popping up, and you're like, frustrating. I just want to see the content. But without the ads, if the creator doesn't put the ads on, it's more than just making money on it. If the creator doesn't put ads on, YouTube does not recommend that content. So the creator is not trying to milk their audience necessarily. Like in my case with the Nullified Take channel, I've got a job that I do separate to the channel. And I'm very grateful that we're now at a point with that channel where the expenses that I have to pay for, like having StreamYard licensed, having Canva licensing and things like that, buying a mic, giving some of my co-hosts mics because of the revenue we've made. We've kind of in a break-even stage with that channel right now, which is amazing. And now we're benefiting because we're starting an extra channel on what that channel is generating. Yeah, which is amazing.
Thank you,
right? Yeah. Thanks. Sponsored. This is sponsored by the Nullified Take channel. We've got our first sponsor. Go Reality TV. Long live Reality TV. We've got Kahuna saying the mic is dope. Kahuna is obviously one of our hosts on the Nullified Take channel. To be honest with you, I will say this out loud, and I don't know how many of the other hosts are listening to this.
Out loud in the mic.
Yeah, Kahuna is the man. Like, I could not do the Nullified Take channel if it wasn't for him. 100%. Because this guy, man, like every time shit's happening on my side, I have to move things around. And this is another thing. Just start a podcast. Get a host that has your back. Like, Kahuna's the guy. You phone him in 3 a.m. in the morning, he's going to come help you. That's the kind of guy he is. And that's why the Nullified Take channel works. Like, he's the backbone of that channel. And I'm not just saying it because he's in here. Honestly, I will message him like a day before the podcast and be like, shit, my schedule's changed. I can't do it at this time. Can we move it to this time, or can we move it to the next day? And he's like, bet, let's do it. Like, he's that guy. And if I can't make it,
That's awesome.
like he steps in, he hosts,
Yeah,
and it really is something like get someone like that. That's a part of
yeah.
having a successful podcast in my mind.
Yeah, you need to have that second person that you can trust and that can just pick up where you left off or where you need that go-to guy that you like you say the 3 a.m. call. They're not asking questions. They go, "Yep, where do you need me? What do you want? I'm
Yeah,
there."
100%. And
So
that's Kahuna.
yeah, talking about mics and stuff. What sort of tools you mentioned about the Streamlabs and stuff? If you're going to start a podcast from scratch, what would be the tools that you would recommend that have been the most useful? You mentioned that you Canva Plus and all those things. What would be your recommendation for anyone who's like, where do we begin?
Yeah, it's super basic. You don't have to overcomplicate it. StreamYard, which isn't a sponsor of this podcast by any means, but
Oh
that's what
yeah,
we're
maybe in
using.
years to come. Maybe in
Maybe in years to
you
come,
never
I'll
know.
see if I can put the overlay on for them live with StreamYard. With StreamYard, if you go and look them up, StreamYard.com, you can get the free version of this and start streaming immediately. The only difference is that you can't have your own backgrounds like we've got here. You can't have your logo and things on it. It'll have like a StreamYard, powered by StreamYard, little link on it. But it's enough to start a channel, right? And you don't have to pay from day one. I invested into the licensed version immediately for myself because I really wanted to, like, I believed in what I was doing to the point where I was like, at some point it's going to break even. So I'm just going to pay for it. And I think it's like $600, the license that I've got USD per year to run StreamYard, right? So, but with the license version that I have, you get extra recordings that you can do, extra capacity to record. You also get the ability to, like I said, you have your own backgrounds and overlays and things like that. And you go from the 720p to the 1080p camera quality that you can have, which is the key things that I sort of did. Obviously, having a nice camera. I did get a nice camera. I spent a bit of money, but you could start like yourself on a webcam. The webcam looks really good. No issues with that. And then for a mic, I would say there's some really good mics that you can get that are not like this one. This one is the SM7B, which is an expensive mic with an arm and everything like that, and you have to run it a little bit differently. And maybe I'll put links up to everything that I've got in the description afterwards, so people can go have a look. If they've got the money to spend on it, they can. But I'll also put an alternative link up for a cheaper USB mic. Like this setup would probably cost like $1,000 Australian dollars at least. But if you were to go and buy like a very like, for instance, I'm trying to remember the name. It's the Rode NT7 or something like that. If you buy that mic, it's not this quality, but it's probably the best studio quality you can get on USB, and it costs about 200-300 AUD. So it's so much cheaper. So you don't have to go and break the bank to start, if that makes sense. And then there's a couple of other key things. Like if you're going to go into the audio realm and you want to have audio podcast, I used basically Anchor.fm, and their Spotify owns them. They now, I believe, podcast for Spotify now, but they give you the ability to, take the audio after this. You basically download the MP3 format. You go onto the podcaster, Anchor.fm or whatever they call it now, Spotify for podcasters, and you upload it in there, and you can immediately link it into like Google Podcast, Spotify Podcast, Apple Podcast. There is definitely a couple of steps you've got to go through to get set up with them, but it's worth it, because when you get in there, Apple is one of the best places to distribute your audio podcast on. And for this podcast, we're going to have a whole new channel for it, because I don't have the audio thing set up yet. But I love YouTube the most. I'm going to be honest, because I feel like YouTube is easier to grow the following, and it's easier to monetize it compared to the audio format, which even with my channel the way it is now, I barely invest into the audio part of it at this stage. I mainly invest into YouTube.
And YouTube is like one of the big things with YouTube at the moment is they're pushing content to go onto TVs too, aren't they? Because people are accessing YouTube a lot more on their TV than they are on mobile devices these days, apparently. So any sort of that visual content, long form content, which podcasts like ours will be a bit more longer, they're not going to be an 8-minute video. They'll be pushing those a bit more, which is interesting. And that's really
it's a good point, and it's one of the reasons why I do like Spotify podcasts as well, because on Spotify you can upload the video version of it, so people can obviously, they don't need to watch just the audio, they can actually switch over to their phone and watch the video part of it. And especially on a podcast like ours, where I think sometimes we're going to be doing different things, and we'll probably talk about, what can people expect on this podcast. And we're about 40 minutes talking about how to start a podcast. Hopefully people have found some real value in that. And please let us know in the comment section, if you watch this at a later stage, what questions we'll ask, what would you like to know more in the future? Because, we'll definitely jump back on and talk about it. Maybe we do a version 2.0 of it. But I'll also look at the comments and reply to as much as I can if you weren't in the live. But I think, this podcast to talk about this, because how do you start a podcast? You hit record, you start episode 1,
you go for gold, and then you talk about starting a podcast.
And then you talk about starting a podcast. It's like, no better way of doing it. And people are like, this is episode 1. How do they know how to start a podcast?
One of us does, one of us doesn't. But
Will is he's like my Padawan. He is learning. This podcast.
Just so long as you're not expecting me to grow a ponytail, I'm a bit buggered. I can grow a beard, but I can't grow a ponytail.
The glory days are done. We're going to bring, Kahuna on. At some point, we're going to definitely bring Kahuna on, and he can have the ponytail. The guy is like in his 40s, and he's still got the hair, long and flowing, so he can come and make you jealous.
Oh, don't you worry. It's okay. It's okay. I still grow it on my chin, so that's the main.
Yeah. It's all in the beard. So what will we be doing on this channel? For me, like I said in the beginning of the podcast, reality TV is a very, very small part of what I like to talk about and do in my day-to-day life. It's a fun part, and I'm never going to stop doing the other channel because I'm invested in that channel. That's where it all started. Kuna saying he can't grow a beard, so you've got him on that.
Between the two of us, we're like this perfect hair growth, back and front.
Yeah, you just got to combine get you into that Dragon Ball Z fusion dance where you can do the little fingers, And that may be something we'll talk about in the future, is our love of anime, So there's so many different things that we can talk about here. So a couple of interests from my side, and then I'll go over to you. And if you feel like we're missing something, things you want to bring up, me personally, I love traveling. I know you love traveling. I know you've been to a few places. I've been to a few places. So at some point, I think there's some interesting conversations we can have around traveling. We've got gaming in common. We both play a bit of games here and there. Music, I think this could be a great channel to talk about different music. Maybe you introduce me to things I've never listened to. I introduce you to things you've never listened to. I'll take you down the rabbit hole of South African music. I reckon that could be
I just got introduced to some fantastic new music on Spotify recently called Bardcore. Bardcore, which is like sort of the old bard style acousticy type, but it's nice. It's different. But anyway, yes.
Never heard of that before. But yeah, so there we go. So I can introduce you to some things. You can introduce me to some things there. Both of us, I think, have got really unique experience when it comes to the professional work environment. You having been a headmaster, you've kind of been, in my mind, being a headmaster, you're kind of like a general manager of a business. So I think you can
you're
give some
almost
insights.
Like the mayor of a community, to be fair.
Yeah.
Because you are the community hub for a lot of things. And
listen, another thing that you are as well, you obviously have kids that you are trying to take through the school system. You want to make them become like the leaders of tomorrow. And I think there's some interesting topics we can dive into that, like, your experience of having been a teacher, maybe things that parents will be very interested in. And then you're a parent as well. So, those are things that you bring to the show. Me not being a parent, I think, that will be interesting to the wider community out there as well. We may have some really good topics about that.
Yeah. Parent. So myself, happily married, as you're a single lad yourself. So I'm a married man with who's been married 13 years, I think.
Better get it right. Megan's going to be listening.
Yeah, no, I think 13 years, 2011. Yeah, 13 years. Three boys, three lads ranging from 10 to 3. Anime as well, a bit of a geek. I got all sorts of anime stuff just surrounding me. Comic booky stuff, Batman, like a bit of a geek. I do Dungeons and Dragons. I'm currently rereading the Lord of the Rings for the 5th time. Wow. But then I enjoy sport, as you do as well. We often have a bit of a chat about the rugby and the cricket
Big
going on.
time.
The Black Caps are currently playing over
Have
in
you been watching, by
Pakistan.
the way, have you been watching Chasing the Sun at all? You probably haven't been able to get your hands on it.
No, I haven't.
We'll sort you
No,
out.
yeah, please. Yeah, no, I haven't. But I did just watch the first episode of Fallout from the gaming aspect, and then which I thought was quite interesting. But no, I very much geeky sort of sports, but everything, and that's the thing. I think both Chris and you and I have in common is we're quite eclectic with our interests, and we have a bit of an interest in a lot of things. And since you've known me, how many different things have I tried? I've gone from woodworking to
both you and I have karate in common as well. Like you're on the other end of it. You're sort of starting your karate career. I've already retired from mine, but
well, starting back. I did
back on
I coming back on, and I've got my two older sons getting into it as well, which is great. So it's been
I love
nice
it, and that's a topic on its own. Like I could literally talk about how, like, I believe karate shaped my life, like exactly who I am today, how I approach everything in life. Like I put it back to karate in so many different ways. Discipline, hard work,
flexibility,
so many things.
all
100%. The reason that I can, like, after, like, we spoke about me being out for 3 years in the beginning of this podcast, but the reason that I have been able to come back and get myself back in shape to go do a Spartan race next weekend, a lot of that discipline that was required to be able to go back. Like I was thinking back of my karate days, like what it was like being a rookie, what it was like being a white belt, doing some of the training camps for like the provincial and national teams and stuff like that. It really took me back to that, So I think having that point of reference is important, and sport is important. So we can definitely talk about a lot of that in the future. And then another thing that me personally, I'm very passionate about, and I know you're also someone that listens to a bunch of different things. I just love motivational things in general. And, there's a lot of really good podcasts out there where people talk about bigger life topics and things like that. And more so importantly, having gone through the experience of having lost a lot when it came to the physical aspect of myself, and then having to come back, what was the things that the mental things that I had to put in place to get myself back there? I think is something I'm very interested in. And then
the psychology behind it all.
The psychology. And while we're talking about psychology, I really believe there is also a really important discussion or discussions that can be had about men and mental health for men. I think that we're living in a generation now where there's so many people that are struggling, not just men, also women, just but obviously we come from a and I think we come from a male perspective on it because we're both men, but it'll be good also at some point I know some female podcasters, get them in if they want to talk about that. There's just some really great topics I think we can dive into in the coming sort of, weeks when it comes to this.
And what excites me is we aren't limited to a set of topic, 100%. And that's something that this channel will be great for, is we can go wherever we feel we're interested, or our audience requests, or we are very flexible to try and talk about anything. And like you say, if it's something that we're not necessarily too knowledgeable on, we may be able to find the right people that we can bring on to talk about those things. Or we would, like, both of us are really good at researching. That's one thing I know, Chris, you like myself, we love to learn. That's one of the reasons why we do learn and consume a lot of the content we do, is because we actually want to learn, and we want to grow, and we want to improve. So if we can, take you on that journey with us while we're doing that, and some of those fun things, sometimes they'll be fun and quirky, sometimes they'll be a bit more serious.
But definitely both.
But there'll always be a bit of humor and because along with it, and it'll be really cool. I think it could be a really interesting ride that we could go on with this.
I think that as people get to know us a little bit better, they'll start learning our quirks and dry sense of humor here and there, and the way that we talk all the time. And then I think at some point we do need to get the wider group of gaming boys on here. Like, I don't know if all of them will want to jump on, but the story about how we met, that's something that we definitely at some point have to tell everybody. But I think that will be interesting. And then getting some of those guys on here as well, their personalities, we'll have to vet some of them. I feel like some of them may not be appropriate for a live show. We don't want the podcast to get canceled.
We just have to put on a provisor at the start of the show.
No, I would be too afraid to let Dale on this show. I'm
Oh
sorry.
no, no.
He's the Scottish guy that we know, got a great heart's in the right place, but it's got no filter. So I
With
know if
the
we had to get him on,
Streamlabs, are you able to mute co-hosts easily? Maybe you need like a
I don't think
hotkey,
I
like a
would be
space
quick
bar.
enough on the trigger. Like that guy, the way he talks, like, and half of the time I don't even understand him. So
He's
like,
Scottish. He's Scottish. He's
Scottish.
awesome. It's that accent. I think half the audience would struggle to understand him anyway. So it'd be fine.
Yeah. So the key plan of this channel, like I said, sometimes we'll dive into those serious topics. Sometimes it'll just be fun topics. You'll get things you'll enjoy coming here and chatting with us about. But more than anything else, I really want to create this online community similar to what we've done on the Nullified Take channel. So if this is the first time that you're jumping into it, you don't understand reality TV, you don't watch it, you don't need to be a fan of it, but I would highly suggest go check out, and I'll bring it once up again on the screen here. Go check out this channel. Go and look at some of the content there. Maybe not the interview ones that we did, because that's just me one-on-one with someone, but go check out how we interact as a group sometimes on here, and see how we involve our community in the chats, and you'll get a feeling for what it's going to be like when we actually have a larger community that actually watches this podcast as well. And just as I say it, we've got one of those lovely members here from the Nullified Take, lovable Nikki. I'm going to have to get your moderator badge on for you here as well. She's one of our moderators on the other channel. Lovable Nikki, I hope you're doing well on that side. It must be very early on your side. But yeah, I think for a first podcast, we kind of covered everything we wanted here about how to start a podcast, what it is that we're going to be doing. One of the things we probably should let people know is that we're not going to be live next week around the same time, because I will be doing the Spartan race, obviously. So, but I'll see if we can get, like, it'll be good to get another episode in somewhere in between. But if we can't, we'll definitely be live the week after that. And I'll definitely talk about it because I'm going to be hyped about it. It's going to be the first time.
Oh yeah, I'll be really interested to find out about it. I have done a couple adventure races myself in my heyday, and I could, maybe we can compare notes a little bit. I was a bit bigger, so I often avoided some of those obstacles that maybe I went, yeah, I'm not going to be able to get up that one, so I'll just go around it. But
yeah,
we can definitely have a bit of a chat about how that got on, how you got on with that. I'll be looking forward to it.
I don't think it'll be
photos.
Yeah, I don't think I'll definitely have some photos, and I don't think it'll be the topic of the next podcast.
No.
We still have to determine on that, but definitely I'll give everybody an update on how it went being back on the Spartan race circuit. As soon as I do this one, we've got the next one happening in August. So the first one that I'm doing is a 6-kilometer one. So just for the sake of Nikki being in the live, I'm going to have to convert that to miles real quick. So it's about 3.7 miles, Nikki, the first one that I'm doing with 22 obstacles. And then in August, I am going up one level, and I'm going to be doing the 11-kilometer, which is close to 7 miles, basically, with about 30-something obstacles. And then straight after that, I'm going to go back into about February next year. My plan is to be back on the 24-kilometer, which is 15 miles, which is what I used to do. So I'm kind of working my way back up to what I used to do, but I'm definitely going to be talking about it. I know that especially, Nikki, you would know that there are some challengers who do Spartan races. So, from the challenge realm, I saw Nerys completed a Spartan race recently with Horacio as well. So, they're in that sort of sphere as well. They also go and do all of the obstacle course races and so forth. But is there anything you wanted to touch on in this first podcast that we didn't talk about? Do you feel like we missed anything?
It was not so much. It'd be more about the case of just if there's anything you want us to talk about, or you'd be interested in finding out about, or things we didn't, make sure you comment or let us know so that we can.
Let us know in the comment section.
Yeah, we can come back to it. I know you'll be pretty avid in looking and seeing what comments we do have and noting those down. And yeah, I'm excited about starting. Thank you, Chris, again for welcoming me back into podcasting. And I look forward to seeing how this channel will morph and change and grow. And it'll be interesting to see how different it is later on down the track from this one today, and what changes happen and how it all evolves.
Yeah, I'm very excited about that. We've got Kahuna locked in to be on the channel if we get to 100 subscribers. He said he can't be seen on the channel until we at least have 100 subscribers. So please,
we're already at what, 20 something, aren't we? Oh, we're 20 something already, 30 something already. Come on, we're
at 32, everybody. So get us there. 100
33 and we're a
subscribers
third
being
of the way
first.
there. Easy. What are you
Yeah.
complaining about?
100 subscribers is the first milestone of the channel. So if we can get there, Kahuna's on. And then I've spoken to Chantal, who is one of the people I mentioned earlier on when I talked about how we started this channel.
Yes.
She's very keen to jump on. I spoke
Perfect.
to Drew about it after I did a coverage with him. He's keen at some point to jump on it. So there will be people from that realm that will come on and talk about wider topics, not necessarily reality TV related, and always, based on how to start a channel. But
Yes.
naturally, when you've got really gifted content creators coming onto the channel, some of the conversation's going to be around, hey, how did you do it? Because I did it my way, but my way is only at 2,000 subscribers.
Yes. Yeah. And the value that they can add to that conversation would be, immense.
Yeah. And both, like I've said, amazing people. I think the audience would love them. Big personalities. So expect to see some guests come onto the show from time to time as well, as we continue to grow the channel. But I'm excited. We got the first one out of the way. So how do you start a podcast? Well, you hit record. You start talking about something.
Just start. Just start. Just hit record and start. And if you can find a good person to buddy up with, do it.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, so for now, that is it. But, everybody, please let us know in the comment section, what did you like? What didn't you like? Hopefully we didn't offend anybody in our first episode. I felt like it was a pretty mild conversation. They're like, not everybody can hit record. But some people don't have the capacity to do that. And we may have been upsetting some people about that, I don't know.
I don't know. Most people have mobile phones these days. I think you can pretty much hit record from that these days.
You've removed the excuse. You've removed the excuse. If they're watching us, they can do it. That's what I feel like. They've got access to internet, basically. They've got their phones. Yeah. So no excuses. If you want to start a podcast, start the podcast. Put a link below to let us know this was the show that got you into it.
Yeah, and we'll jump in and watch and subscribe. We'll subscribe you, subscribe to us, and we'll hit that 100, and Kahuna will have to come on.
Yeah, sounds like a fair deal to me. But for now, everybody, goodbye. We'll catch you next time after the Spartan race to talk about that, and also our second episode and next topic. Thanks, everyone. Bye.